Perfect.
Hello.
Hi, guys. Welcome.
Hey, guys.
Yay. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for taking the time. How are you today?
Doing well.
Doing pretty
Very
good.
well. Excited for the talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yep, as I just mentioned, thank you, Florian. Thanks so much for being so accommodating and sticking with us for just some extra time. And Jed and Rachel will let you go as we originally discussed. So all of that will be done. Perfect. How about we start with a quick intro? Where you're from, what you do. You're all our SDR leaders. Can you tell us about quick intro, please?
Sure. I'm happy to go first. So my name is Florian. I'm a senior manager on the sales development team here at Loopio. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I've been in actually at Loopio for quite a while, over 6 years. I was an SDR for a number of years. I was an account executive for close to 3 years. So I've done it all, and I'm extremely passionate about sales development, as you might be able to see from my shirt here.
That's
sick. So super excited for the talk. I love all things copywriting, outreach. Excited to get into it.
I'll go next. I'm a SDR manager over at Pandadoc. I've been here about 2 years. I joined as like a very entry-level MDR is what we called it. Quickly became an SDR, and then helped join the scaling Outbound SDR team for Pandadoc at the beginning of this year. I don't have a shirt for it, but I'm also very passionate about SDRs, BDRs. I run a newsletter as well on the side where I share a lot of prospecting tips and things that I'm working on.
Thank you.
Awesome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Rachel. I'm a sales development director at Salesforce, specifically for the SDR inbound group. And I'm a second line leader for our AMER team based in Reston, Virginia, a team in the UK covering all of Europe, and a team in Sydney, Australia. So it's really cool to see a global virtual conference done like this. But I also started as an SDR for about a year and a half, and then moving into management. So I am very passionate about sales development as well. So excited to be here. I'm sure I'll learn something as well.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the intros. So, right, as our first panel, we will be talking about outreach mistakes that we all made and how to prevent making those in the future. So if it's okay with you, to start with your experience. Do you remember your first epic outreach mistake? How did it go? Were you able to turn it around?
Yeah, I can jump in. I haven't had anything that's like too crazy. I've heard of some crazy stories on LinkedIn and from some other people I know. There was one time where I sent like a gift to somebody, and then they exploded and sent like a 3-paragraph essay back to me saying they were going to report me to the Better Business Bureau. I had another person who got really pissed off for using hey first name in the beginning of the email. And this was like really early on when I was an SDR when these things happened. And so like when you don't have a lot of experience and someone's like going to report you for using a GIF, like your head immediately goes to, well, maybe I shouldn't be using GIFs in my emails, or maybe I should just say hello first name instead of using hey. So I think like the biggest takeaway from like those sorts of instances that happened when I started as an SDR was that like, don't take all those like at face value. You know what I mean? Like some people are going to be pissed off by certain things, but if it works, it works. Don't just stop using GIFs because one person exploded on you.
It could have just been a bad day, right?
Could have just been a bad day. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I believe we all in sales learn to not to take these things personally when somebody rejects us or complains. Yeah,
that's the thing with the sales development. It's like you're doing things at such high volume that you're not going to please everybody, and you just have to be okay with that. Like I can't say that I've had anything super crazy either, but definitely had my fair share of being threatened with like the can spam like act and threatened to get the company sued. A common one that I know most people can feel is like leaving the variable in like your outreach, or like not moving the company name or like the first name variable, or just like blatantly calling people by the wrong names. It's definitely happened, but again, like you just have to humanize yourself and let people know it's like, hey, I made a mistake. I'm just a human. You just need to be okay with that and move on. There's nothing else that you can really do.
They're saying it's a good thing to acknowledge the mistake in the end to turn it around, right?
100%.
I work within the public sector, so I don't have like an epic story, but I would say selling into government and specifically within the Department of Defense. When I think it was my first month, I didn't address a colonel with their header, right, their salutation, and they did come back to me really upset about that, and I didn't realize like all these hierarchies to be considerate about. So exactly what y'all mentioned, I think it's a learning moment there, and just taking that mistake and making it better. And another common one maybe some folks have ran into is just I live on the East Coast, so it's a 3-hour time difference. I called someone in California at 6:30 in the morning. The first call was a missed call, right? So I was, I think, third step in my cadence. Called them again, and they picked up this time, and they were obviously extremely upset. Happened to be their cell phone number, not their work number. Immediately, like I said, learning moment was, all right, I got to make sure I know time zones, make that a part of my process.
Can you think of any examples when you were able to turn it around, like in a joke? I know one of my teammates, he told me that he was also like early in his SDR role, he put together the sequence. So he has his variables in place, but then he sends out the sequence, as Florian also mentioned, like without the variables actually being filled out. So like without just getting like upset about it, frustrated right away, he just sent the follow-up like in, I don't know, a couple minutes saying, you want to avoid this with your team? I'm happy to talk and tell you how you can do that. So like something like that to turn it around.
I mean, I feel like you're not really an SDR if you haven't ever sent an email template with the variable in there. I feel like everybody does that. And when that's happened in the past, like I've had SDRs who sent out like a blast of emails, like first step of a cadence, and they all just had that variable in there. And it's almost like a good thing because then you have an excuse to send them another email right afterward and just like call it out and say like, yo, that was a mistake. Sorry, it's been a long day of making calls and emails. Are you open to giving me a second shot? Here's why I was reaching out. And then you get 2 touch points, almost like it's acceptable. And people have been generally pretty receptive to that, especially if you sell like salespeople, since they know the game, they know what's going on. So if you call it out right away, I feel like it's a good thing for sure. We've definitely booked some meetings doing that.
Yeah, especially with that call out with like salespeople to salespeople, you want to use that to your advantage and even say it's like, hey, salesperson to salesperson, I made a mistake. And usually if you have the luxury of selling to that type of persona, it's going to be okay. But I know there's certain personas that generally are a little bit tougher. One off the top of my head, like IT and security, generally tends to be a persona that is not as forgiving for sure. Yeah.
And in Rachel's market, I believe would be also a very similar situation, right?
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say over the phone, this is, I'm sure this is a popular one, but I did mention that, I'm new. I apologize for the mistake, owning the mistake and pivoting into whatever your ask might be and why they're calling. That almost immediately kind of breaks them down and they feel a bit more sympathy and end up wanting to help you. Actually, it's kind of reverse psychology.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I have a formula that I was just going to say, I kind of have a formula that's been working very well. Whenever somebody kind of lashes out over email or even over the phone, essentially it's like just acknowledge the mistake, humanize yourself, and then ask for feedback. So generally what that sounds like is just like acknowledging the mistake, being like, hey, you're totally right, I'm sorry, and I definitely missed the mark. Then humanize yourself, and you can even be as an SDR like, I'm relatively new, I'm just trying a few different approaches, and clearly this is not something that's worked. And then actually turn it around and ask for feedback and be like, hey, like if you don't mind me asking, do you think it'd be better if I do this or do that, and actually provide some options so that you're showing the person that you're actually thinking through why you did something in a specific way. And we've managed to turn things around quite a lot with that approach.
Perfect. Thank you. Yep. Okay. I actually have the next question for you guys. Can you share some of your personal do's and don'ts when it comes to cold outreach? Since you're targeting different personas, from your experience, from what I can tell, it would be really good to hear all of the examples.
Yeah, I can go first. I think not neglecting like the little things. So I see a lot of SDRs who might get like a not interested reply, or we're all set, or maybe they got hung up on the phone, and they'll just leave that alone, right? They'll archive the email. They won't try to respond to that. But I kind of think of those like, even if you get a not interested reply, or you call like a VP of sales and they hang up on you, even if you had a little bit of a conversation, that's something you can leverage when you go to call somebody else at the account. The trick is to not lie. So like an example is like, I'll reach out to somebody else and say, hey, I just had a conversation with your VP of sales. They weren't the right person, but I wanted to reach out to you to see if you handle this, right? You can reference that conversation, or you can reference the fact that you were in touch via email. Don't make it sound like I was referred to you, right? Because then that's lying. And I've definitely made that mistake a couple times and lost a few deals because of that. But yeah, like every not interested email you get, every like just quick hang up, or if you have a quick conversation with somebody, like leverage that when you're calling other people in the account. And on the same note, like out of office email replies, those are huge. I just use that as another touch point. If somebody sends me like an out of office email, I'll just respond back to it like, hey, enjoy your time and wherever you're going, we'll talk to you when you're back. It's kind of like an extra touch point, and most people don't do it. And I've got people to respond to those emails that way.
Perfect. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that this, especially this like not interested response that you mentioned that you can get, a good recommendation for the SDRs would be not to just leave it alone, but to actually call back and then try to make a conversation out of it. So I actually have the SDR leader who recommends that first call these guys that responded to you, whether that's not interested or whatever. They should be the first ones to call, apart from your other tasks that you have piled up. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do's and don'ts. How many hours do we have? I definitely have a few, like off the top of my head. So the first thing I'll say is like, do your research. If someone has a LinkedIn profile and they post or they have like a bio, to me, there's no excuse for you not customizing that email. Like, not everyone's going to have that, right? There's a lot of personas that don't use LinkedIn, or certain personas that just don't even have a profile. And for that, I get it. You have to write something more customized, something that's more like templated, and that's perfectly fine. But if you can find something, if they post, there's in my mind no excuse for not having some kind of customization. The second big thing for me is like tiering your accounts. At the end of the day, it's like you have to do a cost benefit analysis of your time. You have to have like your tier A accounts, which are your best accounts that you must have as logos, your tier B and tier Cs. For your like tier A personas, those emails, especially the first email, has to be customized in my eyes. For B and C personas, that's where you want to that's where you can test things out a little bit. You want to do some A/B testing. You want to see if like a risky subject line might work, or a risky like call to action or something. I think it's fine to do it with those types of personas. The other thing that's a big pet peeve for me when SDRs reach out to me is like people that don't have sequences that are 12, 15 steps at least on outbound across multiple channels. The amount of SDRs that message me with 3 or 4 emails and that's the whole sequence is like insane. And I just like don't understand it. You have to give a prospect time to get back to you. Like, what if they're on vacation? What if that week they're going through like a major project and they just don't have time to respond to you? Don't just use one channel, surround them. LinkedIn, email, phone calls. It's proven to work if you have multi-channel approaches. So please do that.
Can I jump in here and just real quick ask you here, because you said that, like 3-4 emails, not enough, not good enough. And like to have the right maybe time frame for the sequence. Do you have a number in place? Should that be done over like 2 weeks, 3 weeks time? And maybe the also the delays in between the steps of the sequence itself?
Yeah, so sequence structure is like a whole like big complex topic, but generally speaking, like the best practice when you talk to even companies like Outreach and Sales Loft and what I've personally do with our teams, around 20 to 25 business days, I think for like a 12 to 15 step sequence is good. And then what I suggest is having what I call bursts or multi touch point days. So like on day 1, typically what we do is like a LinkedIn profile view, call, email, then you give it a day break, then you do a 3 touch burst again. And then like usually in the middle of the sequence, you kind of like lay low a little bit and have some value added touch points. And then typically we start getting aggressive towards the end again, which is what Beck Holland from Flip the Script suggests. Now, that doesn't mean that's the right sequence for everybody. And there's different personas that might not like that, but that's what works generally for sales and marketing personas, I've noticed.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you.
To answer your question, Alex, on my end, I would say so my team is purely inbound, which is the gold mine, right? You have a reason to call. I would say, so our cadence is around 12 to 15 touch points across 30 business days as well, actually. And this kind of leads into my first do, because I agree completely with Jed and Florence. I won't repeat that, but just stay persistent and follow up, trust the process, trust the cadence. A lot of folks give up, like you said, at the 4th or 5th touch point. And based on a Harvard Business Review study that I read, it takes 6 touch points to get. When you get to the 6th touch point, I believe it's a 90% reply rate that you'll get, right? So just don't give up. You got to trust the process. And just to share a don't, one of my biggest pet peeves is when you use that first line, right, which is in the preview header, to introduce yourself. You already have your signature line there. They know who you are. Go right into the why am I reaching out? Why would you want to take a meeting with me? Like, put the why there. And I guess one recommendation I have is, I know there's a hot topic of like, how long should that first email be? In my opinion, if an email is like 3 to 5 sentences, which is on the longer end, as long as you're hyper relevant, concise, and to the point, and it's relevant to them, it will make a big impact, right? Versus maybe a 1 to 2 sentence email where maybe there's not enough context and you weren't able to build that rapport to get to the why you're reaching out. So I know that's a hot topic too, but as long as you're making it hyper relevant, like Florin said, they'll hopefully you'll get that meeting.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, guys. So just like as a quick recap, right? So a good thing would be always to use any excuse, right, to follow up, whether that would be email and call, any sort of interaction. Always do your research. If your prospects have information out there, always use it in your touch points, and then be consistent. Put enough time into it, right? So you mentioned something like even up to 30 calendar days for the sequence, right? Awesome. And then being delivering value right there from the very beginning without the long intros if we are, and sending relevant message. Thanks. All right. The next question that I wanted to ask you guys, since you're all SDR leaders, you all manage teams. In your opinion, what makes a good SDR leader when it comes to addressing mistakes, training the team, helping them to avoid mistakes?
I think you have to be really open-minded. Like, I was an SDR for a year and I thought I was pretty good at it. And I was like, this is the way to do it. So when my team started growing from 3 to like 20 where we're at now, I was like, yo, this is the way we got to do it, guys. Like, this is how it worked for me. And then I had like new SDRs coming in, like all over the US, different personalities, different skill sets that they came with. And they would try out new things. And at first they'd be like, no, that's not the way to do it. Like, I already have this figured out. But like, you know, they're going to make mistakes because they're trying new things. But I think like for myself, and what makes a good SDR leader is like, you have to be open-minded and try to understand like where they were coming from. Why did they try that out? And like help them make the most of like their uniqueness and the skills that they bring. Because I've learned so much from my team and just like the different things that they've tried out. And yeah, they've made mistakes, but you kind of have to meet them in the middle, figure out what they were trying to do. And, you know, if it works, apply those ideas as well. So, yeah.
Are you more for giving them flexibility in the beginning or following the workflow that you already have tested and tried?
I say I try to have, I mean, I guess it depends on the experience that they come in with. But for the most part, you know, we have a process that works. So when they come in, I'm saying like, hey, try to be top of the board in the activity level. Try to figure out our process for the first couple of months. And then once you kind of get in a rhythm with that, you know, you'll start figuring out, you know, more efficient ways of doing things or things that work better for you. So I'd say like more or less stick to the process in the beginning. And then as you get more and more experience and comfortable in the role, start applying new ideas and new things that'll work for you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I think I fully agree with that too. Usually what I say is like in the first 3 months as you're ramping, follow the process that we have in place. And then it's like, once you're ramped and you feel like you're good, you want to start testing different things. As long as you show me data that what you're doing makes more sense than what the process is, fully open to that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Data, especially. If they can show you data, then it's they win.
Yeah.
Just gonna say open-mindedness and listening is key. I feel like I've personally been out of the game for like 4 years, right? Since I've actually cold called someone. So like just keeping an open mind of what things are constantly changing. And I know social is really big now. Video prospecting is big. And so just having an open ear and saying like, how are you doing things? And talking through a new path of like, maybe it's a new cadence, or I'm always open to evolving and changing, because if we stay stagnant, in my opinion, the old ways won't keep working, right? If you have the same cadence from like 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think like as a leader, you also want to let your SDRs know, first of all, making mistakes is okay. Everybody does it. And I think your SDR should feel safe and be like, hey, as a manager, I have your back, like no matter what at the end of the day. You don't need to apologize for doing your job. You're not just an SDR. And I try to continuously push that message to people. And I'm even willing to take the blame sometimes if it's necessary, especially for ramping SDRs. If they're using our sequence and following our process and they get a negative response from somebody, like that's on me as a manager who kind of set up the process. So just having your SDRs back, I think is so important for them to feel like they can do their best work and test different things out.
Okay, sounds good. And yeah, Rachel, sorry, anything else to?
No. I don't know if this is relevant, but I feel like when you catch the mistake through call shadowing, I think call shadowing is really big for managers, like spending that time every week, honestly, because that live accountability or that live feedback is helps so much instead of catching something like a week later.
And that was like something that I wanted to ask next about. So you see that your SDR maybe consistently makes the same mistake, or it's just like a newbie SDR making a mistake. What would be the best way to address it? Would that be like during a team meeting or like one-on-one? How do you prefer handling that with your teams?
In my opinion, if it's a consistent mistake or something that's come up, definitely not, in my opinion, not a team meeting, just because you don't want to call them out live, but in a one-on-one or in that drive time, in the moment type feedback. And what I recommend doing is, I know sometimes as managers, you immediately want to give your opinion or be like, no, this is wrong because XYZ, this is the solution. Just lend that listening ear, ask the question like, hey, what do you think went wrong here? What do you think? What was your thought process? And then have them come up with the solution on their own before. I know my instinct when I was a frontline manager for the first year was immediately like, I have the solution, I have the answer, but letting them get to it is more impactful and powerful.
It could be also a matter of like when you are being taught or when you are being sold to, you have this instinct to protect yourself and like to reject the ideas that are thrown at you. So I like that point, to get them to get to it on their own, right?
Exactly.
100%.
Okay. Let's see. How about, I wanted to ask one maybe for Jed and Rachel, because we have just a few minutes with the two of you. I have one more question about burnout, because that's something that happens in sales teams quite often when SDRs get burned out. Do you have any recommendations how to prevent it?
Yeah, it definitely happens. We have like team meetings every morning. So like if I sense there's a lot of burnout and stuff, like, there's an agenda. So sometimes it's nice just to have the time to just chat and just talk, do something fun. That's the biggest thing. Like if I start sensing that, then we'll just keep it really casual, the team meetings. If you have a one-on-one, maybe just keep it a little bit more casual. Like throwing out spiffs, sorry, the lighting here. Throwing out like spiffs as well that are like kind of exciting as well. That I feel like we have to keep a consistent routine of like throwing out spiffs or doing like in-person team events if we haven't done some in like a few months. So things like that typically help.
So the first way would be to reduce the pressure, like from yourself as a leader and from the team, right? Just to get them to relax a bit, and then also help with the corporate events, right?
Yeah, and like call it out. Like, if your manager is telling you, hey, like I feel a little burnt out too, it kind of gets people relaxed. Like, they don't feel like they're necessarily like, oh, I'm the odd one out. So be like, hey, like I've sensed like we've been working really hard. We just got off a really big quarter. Let's just take this time to chill, talk. And yeah.
I've personally seen the highest burnout in my top performers. And so like they're on top of the world, they're crushing it. And I can see they're like, I want to be the BDR, I want to be next. And it's recognizing it. And sometimes it's me actually slowing them down a little bit, be like, hey, you're absolutely crushing the boards, but like, let's think about your wellness a little bit and your mental health. Like, how are you doing? And these are the ones that are like me personally too, like working through lunch. I found that since we're in a virtual environment right now too, I'm really pushing them to take that lunch hour, like making sure they're off. And like even taking a 15-minute walk is a really easy thing in between a meeting or in between calls. That 15 minutes is going to, just you stepping away right from that monitor is going to go a really long way. And with burnout specifically, I feel like dialing by yourself in a virtual world is just so tough too, especially if you're getting voicemail after voicemail. So I've been pushing my reps to just sync up with each other and doing blitzes through Google Meet or some other way. And that's helped a little bit also, just because it's like back and forth. There's socialization, there's feedback, kind of mixing things in too. But definitely top performers.
Team Zoom dial sessions have helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes we'll just set up a whole team, like just jump on a Zoom, we'll just start dialing and stuff, turn your cameras on. If you get to connect, just mute yourself. But yeah, that helps a ton.
But take care of yourself for sure. Like step away from the computer, take that day off. I've actually asked, like you should take this day. Like this is a perfect holiday weekend. Like take that extra Friday. Kind of pushing them sometimes without them knowing that they're burned out.
Insistent on the time off. Yes, definitely sounds good. I'm just being mindful of the time. I know for Jed and Rachel, we had you guys until 11:30. So before we continue on with Florian, I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time for joining us for this talk, for already providing some helpful insights for the SDR leaders. And yeah, thanks so much. And we'll see Jed in a bit for his session too. Okay.
Thank you for having me. It's been awesome. And it's been great to see a global virtual event being pulled off like this. So really excited to tune in later for some of the sessions. Have a great day.
Yep.
It was awesome. Thank you, Alex. See you, Florian.
Bye. See you soon.
Yeah, take care.
All right, Rachel.
Yes, now it's just you and me, Florian. Huh?
Just us two. Let's talk sales development.
Yeah. Do you have anything to throw in also about burnout before we jump to other questions?
Yeah, I think like as a manager, you want to make sure that you're telling your team to take time off. And I know sometimes it's hard because it's like you have big goals and it's like you want to make sure that you're hitting them. But at the end of the day, it's like you have to make sure that you're telling your team to take time off and also lead by example. Make sure that you as a manager are actually taking time off yourself and try to be open about burnout yourself. Like we all get burnt out, especially in the last 2 years. So I think it's important to be to walk the talk essentially.
In my personal experience, when you finish like a month strong, usually for me it's either the first part or the second one. Like when you're on the roll, you're hitting, the goal, everything is happening. Then I do need to take off maybe the next week to lay low for a bit, like still do the work, but then maybe dial down a bit on like maybe the output that I provide. For me, it's inevitable. I have to do it. But then at the same time, you also have like it's working so well, right? I already exceeded like my quota, or I did what I was supposed to this month. I want to do even more. So that's why you keep pushing yourself because you like the good results that you get. But then you have to remember to slow down a bit.
Yeah, and it's like the role can get redundant. I don't think anyone's like shying away from that. And that's why I think it's so important to be curious, like test out different things, like try new subject lines, try new like email bodies, try a new cold call opener so that you're changing it up for yourself as well. Because if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, I think that actually contributes to burnout as well. Apart from having better results, like A/B testing also actually helps you mentally with burnout as well.
And by A/B testing, you mean like everything that you do or just the automatic side of it?
You can pretty much A/B test, like there's a bunch of different things you can A/B test. The easiest thing to usually A/B test is obviously like subject lines, call to actions, maybe like 1 or 2 sentences, like in your actual email. How are you wording things, changing the preview sentence? You just have to remember that you need to keep everything else constant except for the one variable that you want to change if you actually want to do a proper A/B test.
Yeah.
And then statistically, you want to do at least 100 samples. So let's say I want to test a subject line. It's like, don't make a call on 2 different subject lines until you've sent out at least 100 and see like what the open rates are. And then like switch out the one that's not as good for a new one. And like every month or every quarter, try to like switch things up a little bit.
To be consistent, right, with the content that you put out and consistent with testing out what you have and like the new approaches, for sure.
Exactly.
Right. I actually wanted to ask one more question regarding SDR leadership. So what would be your recommendations for someone who is growing or like wants to be an SDR leader or just transferred into a new leading role?
Yeah, I think a few things that it sounds like every manager kind of just learns by doing. You can never really prepare for it, but you're going to want to help. You're going to want to help with like absolutely everything and provide answers to your team because you're like, I just came from, I was a top producer. I was like an SDR and AE, and I know what I'm doing, kind of like what Jed was saying. And you're going to want to like give answers to people. But I think you really need to fight the urge to do that and let people on your team and SDRs like come to conclusions and solutions by themselves. Like you're not there to give people answers. They learn better when you're guiding them to the right answer, but they found it themselves. And I think that's a lesson that I kind of learned after 1 year of management, where I like wanted to do everything. I came in so hot. I was like, this is the subject lines you should use. This is the messaging. Like, this is how you open cold calls. But people don't learn if you just tell them what to do.
Or answer every question, right? Without giving them the option to go and like find the answer on their own, right?
Yeah, exactly. And another thing too, for like team leads, where you might have a quota plus like essentially you're managing in some regard. I think time management in general is going to be so crucial. Like, be meticulous about your time blocks, because you still have a quota. You want to like help people as well, but you really need to protect your calendar, or else like people are going to start like essentially taking advantage of that calendar of yours, and you're going to burn out.
Okay, sounds good. How do you personally motivate your team? Is your team remote also?
Yeah, so most of us are in Toronto, so we're digital, like I guess by default now. After COVID, we actually this week just opened up the office if people want to come in. Yesterday, I actually spent the day with six SDRs at the office, which was really cool.
A good change, right? From just the Zooming.
Yeah, there's something about like in-person learning and being able to like see people and connect with them, and you can shadow people. Like, I can see exactly like what they're doing, the workflows, and it's not so easy remotely.
Okay, yeah. But do you think that like controlling them, keeping a close eye on them is a good thing to do, or just how regularly do you check in on them, or at least on the performance? Is that done weekly?
Yeah. So, and this comes from like top management in our company, but since I've been there for over 6 years, and one-on-ones has like been a weekly thing, and it's pretty much a non-negotiable for any manager that you have to have one-on-ones with your team every week, every single person on your team. And then on top of that, it's like, especially in a remote world, we make sure that we have like our Monday stand-ups where we kind of talk about the goals. So, how did last week go? What are the goals for the week? If you didn't hit your goals last week, like what are you doing differently this week? And just having a discussion where everyone's talking in a group. And then we also meet up towards the end of the week on the Friday and just discuss like, okay, how did this week go? A little bit of a debrief, and making sure that we're adjusting as we need to.
So having enough communication, right, as a one-on-one and also enough team meetings does in the end help kind of prevent any of the mistakes, right, happening, or like people doing their own thing or doing everything wrong, or actually just being burnt out, right, or not doing their best, right? So just having enough communication, would that be the key?
Yeah, I think so. And then also just doing like, not every meeting has to be work related. Like we introduced something called like hallway chats, where virtually like people could just go in a room and like hang out and play. We used to play this like Scribble game, or like something similar to Pictionary, where you're kind of simulating the water cooler talk, where not every single meeting that you have on Zoom needs to be like just tactics and all that kind of stuff. Like, people get so tired of that. I know I get tired of that. So it's you got to change things up.
Yeah, I think we do play that game too on my team. So
nice.
Yeah. Let me see. I actually have a few more questions here from the audience. Let me see. I have this one here. So if you have limited resources, what is the best chance to focus for a B2B SaaS?
Limited resources, do you know in like what regard?
If you have limited resources, what is the best chance to focus for a B2B SaaS? I'm not sure. Let's say if you have to build a team, if I understand this correctly, if you have to build a team but you have limited resources, maybe what would you focus on? Maybe what sort of tech would you definitely have in place for the team? I don't know if I understand the question correctly, but that's what I got from it.
Yeah, I guess like limited resources, like you probably don't have access to like all these different databases and everything. So I think you can do things pretty simply. At the end of the day, like if you focus on the fundamentals, and I actually remember I spent 2 days being an SDR last year as a manager, where I booked a number of different demos, and I didn't even really use like outreach or anything like that. But I do think one thing that's important is you have to have some kind of database for either phone numbers or emails. I know like there's Hunter and a few other ones that have like 200 free emails like a month or something like that.
Yep.
So I think definitely some kind of database system where you can find that kind of contact information. And then at the end of the day, it's like you can use Excel sheet and track like your sequences and your different steps. And I personally, like, I'm doing copywriting and sequencing workshops right now. And what I preach to people is like, you don't need a ton of technology. Like, just figure out, first of all, if you have the product market fit, learn how to write a good email, learn how to like write a compelling message where you can convince people to like book some time with you and you pique interest. Like, it's so powerful. Just have it. All you need is Gmail, an Excel sheet, and maybe a bit of a database to get emails. And like, you can book meetings, no problem.
Yeah, I actually see a lot of people coming in for automation, which is important, which, you know, it's difficult to go without these days. But then they don't really work through their content and they end up scaling, but the stuff that they send out, it's just not good enough, right? So that would be the first thing to focus on is, what is your message? How relevant is this? Yeah, before you scale it out.
Gotcha.
Sure. And what about the channels, right? So we are in the era of multi-channel. You won't, right? You always need email, phone, LinkedIn at least. Do you have any maybe channels that your team prefers using, or something that maybe is trendy now, video, important?
Yeah, like we try everything. And again, you want to stay ahead of the game, and the market's always changing. So like, what worked 5 years ago is not necessarily going to work now. I would say for my team right now, our emails are still our most popular way to like actually book meetings. That being said, I want to emphasize how important it is that you use multiple channels. Like, you need to have phone calls, you need to have emails, and you need to have LinkedIn in your sequences. Even if someone's not picking up a phone call, that's still a touch point. And this has happened to me too, like recently, where an SDR will call me, will send me an email and send me a message on LinkedIn. That tends to get my attention because I see that name or that person multiple times. And that's just basic psychology. Like, the more times you see something, it's usually 6 or 7 times before you actually like registered in your brain. So the way that I think about a touch point, it's like a retargeting ad. That's essentially what you're doing to some degree. As much as like, yes, we book more meetings on email, we still book meetings on LinkedIn, we still book meetings over cold call, and you need to use all of them. Even if one of them doesn't seem necessarily like it's working, it is essentially doing work in the background for you.
And I also have this one here about voice drops, because as we are talking about different channels, do you see success with voicemail drops? And I would, say phone and LinkedIn as well.
So we don't really use voicemail drops, to be quite honest. We typically, within a sequence, like when we're calling, so we'll have maybe like 4 or 5 calls in a sequence. We'll probably leave one voicemail. And typically what I suggest is you want to make that voicemail a bit more personalized. Like, it takes 5 seconds. You don't need to leave a voicemail after every single call that you do, but just make it a bit more personal. And like, mention their specific name, where you're calling from. Voicemails, it's a bit of a tough one because it doesn't in itself, like, it seems like it doesn't have a lot of ROI, but again, it goes back to this whole idea of the retargeting and just like putting that idea into their head.
And I would also say, because I also talk to people that they do outreach to different industries. And for some teams, they tell me that they book most of their meetings via the voice messages that they record on LinkedIn. And we are always, I guess, coming back to testing, right? Because with some personas, it will work. For some who who would prefer just a brief text with a couple sentences, it will be enough for them. They're not going to maybe have time to listen to the voice drop. So I guess it always comes back to thinking who you are targeting, right?
Yeah. So make sure you know your buyer and where they are. Voicemail drops, we don't do that much. We do like some voice messages on LinkedIn. I think like that's a bit more unique. That being said, though, it's important to know your buyer. Someone like me, my LinkedIn inbox is an absolute mess. If you're prospecting me on LinkedIn, like, there's almost no chance I'm going to see your message. My inbox on email and like my phone is significantly less busy, just because of the nature of like me kind of posting on LinkedIn all the time and like building out a following. So if you know me and I'm your buyer, you should know that that's not going to be like the best place to reach me because it's so crowded.
Okay. But I guess if you don't try it, you won't know, right?
Exactly. And that's the other thing I would say. It's like, it's easy for me to tell you a very general piece of advice. Every single market the buyer is different. The market's different. Your product and market fit is different. Don't just listen to general advice from me, from any influencers. go and look at your data. What your data tells you is king ultimately, and nobody can replace that.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. And you need to have a stack for that too, right? So to be able to like collect the data at the end of the day. Right?
Yeah. So I definitely now I said that you can book meetings with just like Excel sheets and an email and probably some kind of contact database. But I highly recommend if you're an SDR or a manager and you don't have a sales engagement platform, whether it's Outreach, Sales Loft, Apollo, like Outplay, whatever it is, it's very, very useful in terms of scaling out your outreach.
Right. Do you still have a few more minutes? I have another
100%.
question. Okay, perfect. I have another question about LinkedIn email. Is it effective to use it as an initial outreach point?
We don't use LinkedIn emails as an initial outreach point. Again, that's just what we're kind of finding for our market. It doesn't work as well. We sell to a lot of sales personas who have usually LinkedIn presences, and they probably get bombarded a lot. We do have LinkedIn touches where we have a connection request. We definitely do not pitch into LinkedIn connection requests. Typically what we do, and I actually got this from Evan Patterson, who's really good in social selling, but it's pretty much just a message that says hey, I'm not sure if you were a fan of email or LinkedIn, so I just wanted to drop you a note here as well. So it's a very light touch. And then typically they'll respond oh yeah, this is either good or no, message me on email. But you're just opening up another channel of communication to see if they see it.
Okay. And then also, if we come back to the voicemail drops on LinkedIn that you mentioned, that you see that working for you, can you maybe elaborate on that? Give some best practices, what to state there, maybe how long they should be, how consistent you should be.
It's I guess it's like a voice message. It's not a voicemail drop essentially, but I think the only way to technically do it is over the app. So you have a little microphone and you can just talk into it. Typically I recommend something very simple, 5 to 10 seconds maximum, where you're just kind of introducing yourself and you're just humanizing yourself. That's all you want to do. And I think it's the same structure as any email. You're just following hey, maybe notice that you said this on your profile and your company's growing at 30%. I'm reaching out because of this. And then does this sound like something that's interesting? I don't think it has to be anything crazy, or there's nothing revolutionary really in outreach, regardless of what channel you're using, even video, you're just really saying the same thing you'd say in an email.
Yeah, just hear that, when it comes to video, also when it comes to the voice drops, it's important not to make them too long, because if you're busy, most likely you're not gonna watch a video that's 5 minutes long, even 3 minutes long, right? Especially if you have a ton of emails to go through. But I personally used to struggle with, what do I put in those 20 seconds? When I hear these best practices that you keep the video 30 seconds long, I record mine, they're always 45, 50. I always struggle to make them this 30, but I guess you have to practice, and then as you see the results, just keep repeating, right? What is successful at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things in video or the voice drops is show that you're enthusiastic. If you're not excited about your product, how is somebody else going to get excited about it? It's easy for me to tell you an exact script of this is what you need to follow, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. So just go into that with some enthusiasm, smile, show that you have energy, and you should be fine.
And do you have a source of that? How do SDRs, let's say they just joined, maybe they know something about the product, but how do they get into enthusiastic about it? How do they learn it? For me, I would always sort of send them back to AEs, go to demos, go talk to AEs, learn it, and then you can use it in your prospecting.
Yeah. Well, and this is where I think onboarding is so important. So at Loopio, the first week of onboarding that we have is very specific to the product and the market. We don't even teach any sales related skills or tactics until the second week of onboarding. So at Loopio, we help companies respond to RFPs or requests for proposals. So in the first week, what we actually do is every single person that joins the company has to respond to an RFP without a platform. They have to use Google Drive, Excel sheets, all that kind of stuff. And it sucks. It takes hours.
They learn the pain, right? They feel the pain.
You literally have to do it, put yourself in the customer's shoes. And then after that, you're going to go and do it in Loopio, where it takes 10 times less time and struggle. And it's like, that's enough enthusiasm, because like now you have an experience that you can connect with people on because you've done it before. So that's what I recommend for every single company. Like the first week of onboarding should be specifically a deep dive into your market and the product, and make sure that your team is excited and understands the value that it actually brings.
Yeah, I think we should do that. Or Will is actually messaging me right now that with Reply, we also, right, we're a sales engagement platform. So we have people, sometimes we have to talk to people about, so their pain is when they're doing the outreach manually, right? So that's another thing that we can use, or we actually use, to do it manually first before, and then you see this real value in when automation does that for you, and wow, you have actually the free time to research your prospects and do well.
And if you're an SDR and your company doesn't provide like that for you, go do a deep dive, like sit down with an AE and be like, hey, like what is the actual like deep value here? Can you show me a demo? Go listen to like call recordings, try to do whatever you're solving manually and just like go through the pain. At the end of the day, it's like, yes, the company's there to make you successful, but if the people that are truly the top of their class don't make any excuses and they find a way to figure things out by themselves, and they don't wait for other people to give them training, to give them tactics, to give them like motivation.
Yeah, but then like as a leader, if you see somebody on your team who is not doing that, then you can always like, suggest some
100%. Well, and that's what like a good leader does. I'm just saying, like, not everyone has like the benefit of having a fantastic like company and a team. And obviously I suggest you probably look for another role if you can, that's more fulfilling. But first, before you like do that, like figure things out and find a way by yourself. Like you're ultimately responsible for your own success.
Okay, thanks. I have another question here, if that's okay. Yep. Okay, so how many people do you recommend having on an SDR add to a sequence each day?
I think it really depends on your market, your ACV. It depends like what segment you're in, if you're in commercial, mid-market, or enterprise. Like for example, we usually like recommend 20, like 15 to 30 contacts per day in a sequence. But that's just kind of what works for our market. I know like outreach, for example, does about 15 per day.
So the goal here is not to add too many, to give the SDRs really the capacity to do the proper research, right? To not just do like the scale, but then more focus on the quality, right?
100%. Like it's always a fine balance between quality and quantity. So you want to make sure that you're not just adding people to the top of your funnel and having 100 people through, but if you have 12 to 15 steps, like there's a lot of work that needs to happen to get people moving through the sequence.
Right.
So, and we actually kind of went through that problem. Like we would have SDRs adding too many people and we focused too much on like activity. And then it's like people weren't moving through the funnel and the sequence wasn't doing its job. And then the conversion rates dropped. So you have to have like a fine balance of like making sure that you have a decent amount of volume, but that there's meaningful touch points and you're pushing people through the actual funnel and letting the sequence do its job.
Right. And I see this as like among a lot of this shift from like quantity to quality. And when you focus on quality, then you have to do this gradually. Now, when we're talking about quality, it's way more touch points. So of course, as you said, like they will accumulate, right? The leads will accumulate if you add too many. And it's not about sending out a blast to 200 people. It's about actually giving proper outreach through multiple channels with a good quality messaging. Right. Let's see. I had another question about the sales targets. What's the best way to build out realistic and fair sales targets?
This is the magical question that every sales leadership team tries.
I was trying to stay away from it, but my team is pushing it on me, so I have to take it.
Honestly, it's tough. Like the way that most companies set targets is ultimately based off of like revenue goals, which is not always like necessarily fair. And funny enough, I actually just did a LinkedIn poll about this. I asked I think I had 1,500 people or so kind of like vote on what are fair targets in terms of like sales qualified opportunities. It looks to me like most companies are between like 8 to 15 SAOs if they're like in the mid-market space, under 10 if you're in the enterprise, and then if you're doing a very transactional sale, that's under $10,000 in ACV. It really depends on the market, but it could go from like, I've seen 20 to 60. So those are some of the benchmarks I've seen in the market. Is that like the most fair way to do it? I'm not exactly sure if anybody has the answer to how to fully set fair quotas. I'd love to learn from you.
I know, right? But anyway, thank you for taking the crack at that question for me.
Yeah, no worries.
Awesome. And I like it that we established it today that email is not dead. Just because you hear this, every now and then on LinkedIn or some posts like email is dead, calling is dead. It's not, right? If you use it right, and as you said, your team also books most of the meetings through LinkedIn, and email, and I can say the same thing about my team. So every channel is still alive if you use it correctly, right?
100%. 100%. It's never the channel that's dead. I mean, I can tell you, like, I'm not just here as a sales trainer or influencer. Like, I have a team. I'm in the weeds every single day. We book meetings off of cold calls. We book meetings on LinkedIn. We book emails. We book meetings over email. They all work. You just have to make sure that you're actually doing them properly.
Right. Okay. Let me see. I feel like we've really taken advantage of you, Florian. Thank you so much for sticking with us, for taking the time.
No worries. I love talking about this stuff.
Discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say for anyone like that's listening in, add me on LinkedIn. If you have any questions or you feel like you're struggling and like you want me to like look over some stuff for you, I'll do my best to try to make myself available. Ultimately, like I came back to managing SDRs after being in AE and a closer because I'm very passionate about the sales development world. So I hope I kind of use some of that passion here today, and please connect with me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Take care,
Florian.
everybody.